You've reached the Hyper Guy Motivational Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a wonderful guest here today, Mr. Timothy Long. Timothy Long currently works at a nonprofit organization that helps people with education getting their high school diplomas and their GEDs. He has previously worked at UPS, worked at a restaurant, and as I said earlier, he's working with a great nonprofit, and we're going to get into that right now. He's also getting his Bachelor's of Science in Mathematics, which is amazing, and then he wants to go on and get his master's degree. Uh, Mr. Long spent 26 years in prison, and he had 4 consecutive life sentences and life terms. He's going to get into all that in his process and how he's become the wonderful person that he is today. And and we're going to talk about a bunch of myths and other things that in his own experiences going through the system and all the things he's learned. And we're going to go through that process with him. And so, hey, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, sir.
I appreciate it. Oh my God, he calls me sir. So, hey, you never call me that, Tim. So it's all good. And I didn't mention too that you worked a lot of nonprofits too, and it's interesting because one of the things I love about you, Tim, is that you got these other jobs when you got out, but the job you have today is because of all the volunteer work you did, and then people started saying, "Hey, who is this guy that's doing volunteer work on top of a regular job?" And that ended up getting you a job.
That is exactly true. I was volunteering for 5 Key Schools and Program as like a teacher's aide, essentially, at Glide Memorial in San Francisco. Like 3 days after I got out, I went and Glide. I was like, "Hey, can I help some people?" And it was like, "Yeah, come on." And I was doing that for a while, but I was having these small jobs working with UPS, and I was working at a restaurant called Keller. And I was making enough money, but I needed like a full-time gig. So they was like, "Well, you can come work with us." So they hired me on as a teacher's aide. And from there, I've been there with them for like 6 years now, and I've promoted through the system. Um, and I've run into some roadblocks and some stumbling blocks along the way, like everybody else. But I can't really complain.
Well, I mean, you're doing amazing things, so I have to give you credit. And then when you get your master's, don't forget about us, especially in mathematics. So you didn't. It wasn't like you picked the easy major. That's for sure.
No, well, my bachelor will be in mathematics, and I'll have that this coming on end of the school year. My master's program, I'm thinking it's going to be in like leadership or something like that. I mean, who gets a master's degree unless you plan on a master's in mathematics, unless you plan on going into teaching at a collegiate level or something like that. So I want to, I think maybe leadership or maybe a business accounting or stuff like that. I want to stay with the company that I'm with, but there are some roadblocks that would prevent me from becoming a teacher. So,
Yeah, no, it's all good. I get you. But let me ask you this. So let me ask you, Tim, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but I was raised in Detroit, Michigan. Um, my mother was really en route from the East Coast to Detroit when she had me in Cleveland. And then she kept going to Detroit, and that's where I was raised at my entire life.
And do you have any brothers and sisters? And what was growing up like? And when did you come? I guess you moved to San Diego eventually. How did that happen?
Well, first I do have brothers and sisters. I have quite a few. For my mother, I just have one younger brother, and but for my father, there's a whole tribe of us. But we all pretty much grew up together a lot of times. My father, one of the few great things he did, he made sure that we all knew each other. So even to this day, we're all in our 50s or what have you. When we get together in summers, go on trips together, just all my brothers and sisters. So we have a great relationship.
And what was your relationship like? You said one of the things your dad did. Um, what was that relationship like growing up with your mom and dad? What was the relationship like with your parents?
Well, I was essentially raised by my mother for one. My father, my mother had me when she was 16, so she was a teen mother. My father was not really around a great deal of time. He would pop up every blue moon just to see what his son looked like. But he did not do a great job at that a lot of times as well. I would be one of them stories where if you can imagine a kid standing at the window looking out for his father to come driving down the street, but his father never show up. that would have been me. As of like 5, 6, 7 years old.
And what was that like for you? Was it a struggle financially for your mom to raise you guys? And what was it like growing up?
For my mom, I mean, she did the best she could. I mean, as a teen mother, and then she was in her early 20s when I was like 5, 6 years old. So she did go back and get finish high school or got a GED. She took some college classes, but she worked in the medical field for a lot um during those early years that I can remember. Um, so she did. I would say she did a great job with me and my younger brother. Um, Even though she's had a couple failed marriages, dudes that I mean, on it, when you look at it from the front, they you would have thought they would have been some great guys, but they really weren't. She's married now, and she's married to a great guy, my stepfather. He's a cool dude, Southern guy. Has a great ranch down there in Southern Indiana that I love to go visit.
And what was it like growing up for you, Tim? I know, like I said, and we're going to get into like the history and just kind of how you got into, you started getting into some trouble in the system. Growing up, did it start when you were younger, or did this happen when you became a teenager, or what was that like? What was that the progression for you like?
Um, I would say for the most part in the developmental years, I was really just an average kid. But then when one of my mother's marriages failed, we were forced to move with one of her friends. Um, and her friend had an older son who was like 7, 8 years older than me, and that guy was berserk. But nobody knew but me. He was abusive. He would do all type of weird stuff to me, which had me really in a state of fear the whole time that we stayed together. And that was like probably from age 7 to 10. Um, and it was that really fear mentality that I had from him that really changed some things in me from the person I probably would have grown if I had not experienced that, because that fear turned into like a constant anger, or I'm not going to let anybody do anything to me. I'm going to do something to somebody else before they have an opportunity to do something to me. And it was that evolution from fear to anger to now I'm finna become this thug, because if I was this thug in the beginning, maybe none of that would have occurred to me. I mean, would have happened to me. You know what I mean? So that it was during those years that really altered really my compass from the person I probably should have been or would have been into the person who saw it easy to carry a gun, who saw it easy to sell drugs, to steal stuff from people, or all the other myriad of crimes that I committed in them teen years.
Tim, when did you come to the realization like that you said, hey, you know what? There must have been some point that you had the realization that these formative years that you said 7 to 10, you must have processed in some ways that, hey, this significantly changed me,
It was
and
that
why?
that was during the years of incarceration. When you really, because incarceration, you have a lot of time to think about yourself, think about your past, think about um, how you developed to the person that you were, and how I got these multiple life sentences. And when I started thinking back on it, I was like, what changed me from that average kid that everybody loved to the person where if you'd have walked and seen me coming down the street, you should have crossed the street to avoid me. And it was really that pattern of aggression that I developed. It was like they call it toxic male aggression, is what it's called now. But mine developed from that experience that I had of being abused for them years. And I realized that while I was sitting in the cell at Pelican Bay.
And when did you start? When did that process start? When you said you started going into like moving and hanging out with people that probably weren't pushing in the right direction. You said you started to become, as you said, a thug. Um, when did that start? Did school start falling off? Was your mom around? And how
Um,
did that?
yeah, that started in them early teen years when I was maybe 12, 13 years old, living in Detroit still. Detroit East Side. And if you know something about Detroit East Side, it's equivalent to maybe East Oakland, which is probably why I like East Oakland, but because is comfortable to me, even though I shouldn't be comfortable to me. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, because I had experienced those situations of being abused, now I became this hyper aggressive person where you couldn't abuse me. You couldn't even say anything to me without me taking it to the next level. Um, because that guy was older than me, any male figure who was older than me who tried to tell me something, I automatically assumed that he had bad intentions. And because I assumed he had bad intentions, he couldn't say anything to me, or I would like flex up on him. Even though I was a kid, I was I wasn't the greatest kid in the world, you know.
And so let me ask you, during that time, when was the first time that you had contact with the criminal justice system, and then how did your mom deal with that?
The very first time I had contact with the criminal justice system, I was 12 years old, um, in Detroit. It was me and some guys. We were, I was shooting a BB gun, and right behind my house, just doing some kid stuff, shooting cans or whatever I was shooting at. Someone called the police and said I had a gun, and it's very similar to the Tamir Rice situation, where all these cops just popped out of nowhere pointing guns at me, and I got this BB gun in my hand. Um, it's only the grace of God that I'm still alive today behind, from that situation, because it could have ended up just like the Tamir Rice situation. They told me to drop the gun. I dropped the BB gun and told me lay down. I laid down. One of them ran up to me, kicked me in the back of the head. And I was 12 years old. I was arrested that day. And oddly enough, I hadn't seen my actual father for probably 3 or 4 years. I don't know how he knew or how he found out I was in jail, but he the one that came and got me out of jail that day. And I hadn't seen him for years.
And then how did your mom deal with that? And then how did it start to cycle from there?
Well, my mom knew it was a BB gun. My mom knew I had the BB gun. Um, so she still saw me as I was a quiet kid around her. She didn't know that I was really this bad kid in development at age 12. So for her, it was like, well, it was just a situation where the cops got carried away or what have you. She didn't know that I was this kid that was really about to turn into this really thug felon. She would have never. You couldn't tell her that I was going to become that person.
Did did going to jail, did that scare you at all? Or what was that like for you?
Um, it did not scare me for some reason, and I think back about it, and when I think about schools in Detroit, it, well, everyone's familiar with the school to prison pipeline. How schools are heavily policed. That's how schools were in Detroit, from middle schools to high schools. So I was not really scared of being in jail, even though I was only in there for initially when I was 12 for a few hours. It didn't bother me.
So what, it wasn't a big deal for you. And then when did you get arrested again? When did it start becoming like a habitual thing? And for what kinds of things?
Though I had committed a various amount of crimes between the age of say 13 through 19, I had never been arrested. Um, Call it the grace of God or call it whatever you want. I wasn't arrested again until I caught my life conviction offense at age 19.
So what were you doing during the other years? Was school something that was important to you? Like what was your life like?
School was easy to me. Um, I caught on concepts very easy, especially math and science concepts were very easy for me. I mean, I could write fairly well, so school wasn't the issue. It was maybe a boredom of school, which was the issue, which caused me to start skipping classes a lot of the time. Um, I played sports in school. Sports were easy for me. Even though I was a tall kid and I could play basketball and I could play football, my mother really wouldn't let me play on the high school teams because I only managed like a C, maybe a B average. Sometimes and when I wasn't going, she was really like, no, you can't go on the swim team. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I can respect that because she wanted the best for me. And she knew me just being in sports really wasn't it.
So what was your plan? Like after you, and how did you get to San Diego? Did you right after high school did you go to San Diego? What was
Nope.
that? How did that happen?
I stopped going to high school in the 11th grade just because I had so many absences. And I had been doing these other crimes in Detroit in this is like the middle 80s. Like I must have been like 16, 17, where I was stealing all these cars. And now the police was really looking for me and the other guys that I knew within my family or what have you who were stealing these cars. So I left Detroit and I moved to South Bend, Indiana. In South Bend, Indiana, I really carried on the same mentality that I had in Detroit. I was now staying with my sister. If I was 16, she was like 20. My older sister, this is Nita, great woman. But she really didn't know what to do with a teenage brother who was really just running wild. She tried her best, but it didn't work out. So at age 17, while walking down the street one day, kind of intoxicated, I'll admit that, I stumbled into a recruiter office, drunk, and said, "Can I sign up?" The recruiter said, "Sure, you can sign up." Now, I was 17, intoxicated, without a high school diploma, and they said, "Yeah," which was funny when you think about it. They said I just had to get approval from my parents. So I called my mother. My mother was like, "If you think that's best," and I called my father because they needed both parents' approval. My father was like, "Boy, you shouldn't do that, but it's better than what you was doing." So I ended up joining the Navy, and that's how I ended up in San Diego, California.
And how long were you in the Navy for?
I joined at 17. My commitment offense is at 19, so I was in the Navy for a couple years.
So did your community offense happen while you were in the Navy?
Definitely while I was actively in the Navy, because largely my mentality hadn't changed at all, even through boot camp. Um, and I'm surprised I made it through boot camp because I was still this hyper aggressive teen male. Whereas my drill sergeants, and you know how drill sergeants can be, they I, they figured out fast that I had an issue with authority, but they didn't know what to do about it because even though they thought they could tell me what to do, and to the large majority, I would do it, but it would always be some pushback until they figured out, well, maybe we'll put him in a position where he'll help other people pass. So they made me like in boot camp, it's almost like what is it called? Starboard watch section leader, whereas you're in charge of a bunch of guys while they're in boot camp. So I helped them pass throughout the physical portion or whatever, and educational portion of boot camp. But I was still this hyper aggressive dude who you just couldn't tell anything to. But I passed boot camp, went on through aid school while in the military. And then they shipped me out from Great Lakes, Illinois, where I went through training to San Diego, and I was stationed at 32nd Street Naval Base on the USS Germantown.
So then, how it's very interesting that you were in the military, and most of the time you hear that people when they go to the military, that changes them. But in this case, because you said, like you said, you had such your mentality wasn't in a place where you could really accept a lot of that,
Right.
and they didn't know what to do with it. So how did the community offense happen?
My commitment offense happened while I was on unauthorized absence, for one. It was right before the Desert Storm situation in the late 90s. I mean, late 80s. This must have been like 88, 80, 89 or something like that. Right when all them ships were starting to deploy to go to the Middle East. I was on AWOL and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get back on the ship. I'm talking to some guys on the ship. They was like, well, you just turn yourself in, you go to the brig for such a much time, then they send you back to the ship, and it is what it is. All right. But I had no money. I was like, well, how do I get some money until that point where I decided to turn myself in before the ship deploys? So me and this other guy who was he was a former Marine, or he had just got out the Marines or what have you. I was 19, and I think Terry was like 26 or 27. We were hanging out together, drinking together. He was like, "Well, let's go out and get some money tonight." I was like, "Well, all right, come on, let's go." So I went out with him drinking, with guns in pocket, and we end up committing this robbery, which turned into 4 counts of kidnap because we were on this busy street. And when we told these guys to get in the car, it turned to kidnap. And kidnap carries life sentence.
And were you armed at the time?
Yes, I had what was it, a 12 gauge shotgun.
And you said that you had 4 counts. How did it turn into 4 counts, though?
Because there were 4 victims who we put in this car just to move them off this busy intersection to commit this robbery.
And then how did you guys end up getting caught?
So the robbery turned into it's not a funny story at all. It's really some buffoonery that we got into, where I have to go with this guy to go get the money out of his apartment building. My crime partner at the time parked the car illegally on a university parking lot where they have university police patrolling, and they saw the illegally parked car, grabbed him, and the other guys that were in the car who were also kidnapped victims told them that I, the other person, was still in the apartment with their other friend. So as soon as I came out the apartment building, police were there waiting on me.
So you went to trial, and had you been, you had not, it's interesting, you had not been to prison, or you had never been to prison, and you'd only been to that jail that one time when you were young.
Right.
What was that like for you when you were convicted, and what was going through your mind process wise? Was there any regret? Were you at the time, and what was that process like for you?
For me, it was almost too easy to acclimate to the thought that I now had committed this crime and I now had essentially a life without possibility of parole sentence. When you think about, I got 4 consecutive life terms where I can't get out until I die, come back, and then come back again. Will I actually be eligible for parole? Um, and like I said, growing up through the Detroit public school system, it's essentially a segue into the prison system. When you think about the, we had actual police patrols on our school campus. We had to walk through metal detectors going into school. There was a police substation on the campus. So it was almost a mirror of that system. So when I was sentenced and getting into prison, it was like, oh, this is like walking into my high school every day.
When you first went into, what prison did you go to initially?
Um, my initial intake was at because I was in San Diego County. It was a reception center in San Diego, right outside of San Diego. I think it was El Cajon or something like that. And it was that prison escapes me the name of it because I was only there a short amount of time. But from there, they sent me to New Folsom. I stayed there for a short amount of time because I was really supposed to go to Old Folsom, which is directly across the street from it. And I stayed in Old Folsom about a year. This was in 91. In January of 92, they opened up a new prison in Southern California called Calipatria. And that's where they sent me to open up that new facility. And I stayed there initially like 4 years. And then I went to just about all the maximum security prisons in California, from one to another, just because I was really just being an ass generally in all these prisons. And so my custody level kept going up higher and higher until it really couldn't go any higher.
So can you tell me about that? Like, what put you in that state of mind? Did you want to be that way, or did you say, hey, you know what? What is the mindset of somebody that gets a life term, at least in your situation? And and
Um,
and why did you think you were being that way? And what kind of things were you doing?
I know exactly why I was being that way. Um, I was 19 at the time. I might have been, yeah. I was 20 when I was still at Old Folsom, and then I was 21 when I was at Calipatria. Um, I was a non-affiliate. I wasn't a gang member, And guys, when I was in county jail, they was like, guys knew me, they knew my personality, they knew my demeanor. They was like, Tim, you're gonna have some problems when you get to prison because you're non-affiliate. I'm like, I don't care, I'm non-affiliate. It is what it is. They was like, well, maybe you should become a Muslim or a Christian or what have you, and then it would be a little easier for you. And to me, I was like, I don't want the easy route. It is what it is. I'm not finna become a Christian. I am a Christian, but I wasn't finna use a Christian as a crutch to try to save me from whatever is going to happen. I wasn't finna look for protection from being a Muslim. So I was like, I'm gonna be me. So I just stepped in there and I really pulled up the most aggressive version of me that you could get as a skinny 19, 20-year-old kid. So whatever fight there was to have, I was going to fight it. I wasn't finna dodge it. I wasn't finna walk around it. I thought I was a man, and I was finna walk it as a man. So I did a lot of all the stuff that you do in prison. Whatever fight it was to have, I fought it. If it was a knife that was supposed to be carried, I carried it. If it was a riot or melee to have, I almost died in it, but I was in it. It was that prison stuff and it wasn't easy. When you got guys trying to stab you just because of the way you look, and you got to protect yourself. So, I mean, and you walking alone in the prison. I mean, other than being black, that was my only commonality. Because there was first you black, and then it started segregating into different gangs or religions or whatever. But I was just a black guy in prison. Didn't run with a gang, didn't run with a faith. So I ran by myself.
How uncommon is that? Someone that just runs by themselves. I find that to be very uncommon in the prison system. Usually people align with somebody. Is that correct?
Usually they do, but it's not uncommon. It's officially called unaffiliated. If when you go and get to the prison system, they ask you, where are you, a Crip, are you a Blood, are you a Muslim, are you Kumi or what have you, and you say no, I'm unaffiliated, and they're gonna put you down as unaffiliated. You are not anything. And mostly guys who are unaffiliated are from outside of California, and there are quite a few of them within the prison system. There were I found out there are a lot of guys within California prison system that are from Detroit, Chicago, from the East Coast, from southern states, and they all were unaffiliated.
And what's the politics like in prison? Is there a lot of politics in the prison system?
Politics is ridiculous. you definitely, there's politics just between the races. Then there's politics between the gangs. Then there's politics between based on the segregation of yards, where you eat at, where you can use the bathroom at within the prison yards or whatever. Everything is segregated from day one, and you know it. It actually begins in county jail, where the segregation begins, and people just carry that same segregation mentality straight to prison. If you black, you can do this over here. If you're not black, don't go over there, because you go over there, they're gonna try to do something to you. It is what it is, and you have to be able to acclimate to that mentality, because if you stray from it, it can get you killed instantly.
And so, at what point did you realize? I mean, I think you and I had a discussion earlier when you got to 4 life sentences. Did you just give up hope and say, "This is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life"? How was that process for you? And then, how did you change out of that mindset?
Um, I did. With 4 life sentences, I have no expectation of ever getting out, which is why initially why I was just acting the way I was. I mean, I was like, I'm going whatever the prison stereotype person you thought should be is what I adapted for myself. So I did everything to break prison rules. If it was making knives, if it was participating in all the melees and riots, making different, they call it Pruno, which is inmate manufactured alcohol. I did all of that for about 10 years straight, until I realized at some point it was useless. I mean, I had been through like New Folsom, Old Folsom, Calipatria, High Desert, which was another prison I had to open in like 2000. I mean, in '96. Then they sent me to Pelican Bay, and I went through all these prisons just because I was really just being a jackass the entire time. And when I got to Pelican Bay, Pelican Bay was one of the worst prisons that you can go to in the state of California, if not in the United States. It was during the war years between black guys and Mexicans, and I still held that mentality initially while I was there. Got into whatever prison riots that went along there. You remember the big riot that they had in I think it was like 1999, maybe 2000, that got a lot of publicity. I was right in the middle of that. Almost got killed in that also. But it was during the lockdown that happened directly after that that I started to really sit in the cell and I was sitting in the cell for about a year, really just thinking about my life, the direction of my life, how I got to that point. I mean, I still had no expectations of getting out of prison at all. I knew that I was going to die in prison for sure. But I didn't want to be that same person, because when it was like maybe 99 or 2000, I forget exactly what year it was. My grandmother passed away, and she was one of the few people that I still talk to occasionally. I mean, I can call her and just hear her voice and I would feel a little bit better. But when she passed away, and nobody told me she passed away, not my mother, not my brothers, sisters, nobody told me. She was just gone. And then I got a letter from an ex-girlfriend that sent me the obituary. I was like, how am I getting an obituary from my grandmother and ain't nobody told me my grandmother passed away? That really hurt. And that's when I really was like, I don't want to be that person anymore. I signed up for a GED class while I was at Pelican Bay. I'm still on lockdown. Studied for a couple weeks, and I got my GED, and I think it was like 2000 or 99 or whatever. And the guy who was the GED instructor, he was like, "You passed this, and this is the second highest score that anybody has ever seen who passed the GED from that institution. And the only person who had the highest score was the guy I was helping in math, because he scored a couple points higher than me. He was like, you really should be in school. You should be doing something." And I was like, you're probably right, but I'm at Pelican Bay. What is it to do beyond this?
And Pelican Bay, for a lot of people, if you can describe maybe your average day in Pelican Bay.
Can you repeat that?
For our listeners that don't know what Pelican Bay is, if you can explain what a Pelican Bay is and what's your average day like? I know that at one point you spent most of your time in a cell by yourself, correct?
Yes, I did. Pelican Bay is the maximum level 4 prison in California. That's like the worst of the worst. If you committed a murder in prison and they want to send you somewhere, they're going to send you to Pelican Bay. If you've attacked some officers while in prison and they want to send you somewhere where you're going to really regret it, they're going to send you to Pelican Bay, because it's very controlled. That's where they send guys like who committed these heinous crimes, either even outside, they send them directly to Pelican Bay. If you're a gang leader, they send you to Pelican Bay where you have limited contact with gang associates. Well, supposedly have limited contact. And my days there was really just sit in the cell a lot of the time, because a lot of time I was in a hole for whatever reason, whether it be melees or get caught with a knife or inmate manufactured alcohol. But then you can go out. I mean, there's like a social, they have a main line at Pelican Bay, and I was on the main line for a while. And the main line is really just, if you don't have a job, it's really just go out, go lift some weights if they had weights at the time, or go out and do some calisthenics, which I was a calisthenic king then. Play some basketball, stay as healthy as possible, because you knew you had to stay healthy, because eventually the next war is about to jump off again, and you don't want to be out of shape. That's essentially the top and bottom of Pelican Bay. Stay healthy because it's about to go down eventually, and that's guaranteed.
And so you said you got your GED, and it's very obvious to me you're a very very smart guy. So you got your GED, and then you said your grandmother passed, and you wanted to, um, in some ways it sounds like you wanted to honor her in some ways and say, you know what, I can't keep living this way. And you started to do your GED, and then where to go from there? Because that's a huge leap from 10 years of being in the most difficult situations in the prison system, getting your GED, and then you made a complete turnaround, which is really amazing that you had that kind of insight. Where do you think that came from?
Um, I don't know where the insight came from. I just knew that trying to be the baddest person in prison wasn't really the thing to do. Um, and fortunately, I had been on lockdown so long at Pelican Bay, my prison points started dropping down, which means my custody level started dropping down. And they transferred me out of Pelican Bay to Ironwood State Prison. And in Ironwood, they just happened to have a college program there. So as soon as I got there, I signed up for it. Um, signed up for, and I also signed up to be a tutor for one of the ABE classes. The guy who had did the test for me at who had administered the test at Pelican Bay, he had wrote me a chrono that says that he did a great job. He'd be a great tutor or what have you. And I took that chrono. I went to Ironwood, showed it to one of the teachers there. They hired me as a tutor, and I did that at Ironwood for a few years whilst participating in this college program. The college program, though it was free to take the classes, you still had to buy the books. And I didn't want to be a burden to my family. And so I very rarely asked for anything. And plus, the state takes, at that time, it was probably 22% of whatever funds that you got coming in from your family. The state would take 22% of it for restitution or inmate welfare fund. And that kept going up. It'll go up to 33%, went up to 44%. So I never got money from my family. The only thing they would send me would be if I needed some shoes or what have you. And they'd send that. Um, but yeah, I signed up for these college classes and I really just stayed in school while at the entire time I was at Ironwood. And because the books were not free, I ended up talking to one of the teachers there and talked them into sponsoring a fundraiser, and with the funds, just buy books for anybody who wanted to participate in this college program, so that they wouldn't be a burden to their families. And we earned almost $20,000 from this fundraiser, selling pies and chicken, and we bought $20,000 worth of books for all the college classes that courses that were available.
And so you really got into school. That kind of you started focusing your life on school. And where did you want the school to take you? Did you just wanted to? What was the purpose of it? Did you want to do just to better yourself inside the prison, or where did you see it taking you?
For me, it was part of a pastime to do because I have a lot. You have a lot of time in themselves to study. Um, but it was also just to get to know myself, get to know the world better because I essentially, even though I had traveled, I really didn't know anything about the world. Didn't know much about myself really. So taking all these various college classes allowed me just to get a different perspective of life in general. Different cultures. Some sociology classes that teach you a lot about different cultures. Them anthropology classes teach you about the world. Um, so I really enjoyed that. And the math came kind of easy to me. Um, so I really excelled in those classes, and I helped a lot of other people excel in their classes because I was still a tutor, and then I became a tutor for the college program at Ironwood as well. I would help guys do their math studies or what have you, and so that they would do well on specifically the math classes.
So Tim, I'm just wondering. It sounds like it made you feel really good to help people. It's like you kind of found a niche for yourself. Is that what you're thinking? It felt good to give back, and I
Initially,
mean,
yes, that's exactly what it was. Um, you could I don't know what maybe it's like an intrinsic value that you get from helping other people. You see their success or whatever, and their success helps you feel good. Um, that's a lot of what it was, I believe. Just helping other people become better people. Some of the guys that I helped get into them college programs and pass certain classes, I talk to them now and they be like, man, I'm glad that you was there and you helped me get into that sociology class or whatever class it was and helped me pass it. Because I mean, it gave them new insight upon themselves and really probably was the catalyst to them getting out of prison.
And so it was a catalyst for you getting out, obviously. And then when did you realize that you'd have an opportunity or a chance to get out of prison?
Um, I actually still when I had completed probably three different AA programs in prison, so I had these 3 degrees. Then I was signed up into like a alcohol drug counseling certification program. I got the specialist 1 and specialist 2 certification with no expectations that I was getting out of prison. This was just something I wanted to do to know about myself, to know about my family, alcohol abuse within my family or what have you. None of that had no gave me the inkling that I was going to get out of prison at all. What initially got me to thinking that I might get out of prison one day, I was at where was I at? I was at San Quentin State Prison from 2011 to 2016. And San Quentin is a different breed of prison. I'll just tell you that off the top because it's almost ran like a college environment. Everyone in there is either going to college or you're going to these self-help programs, you're going to these trade programs. It's almost a developmental program to prepare you to get out. Even though I had no idea that I was getting out, I was still doing college. I was now doing like pre-calculus classes through a college program they had there. And then it was called PUP, Prison University Project, ran through Patton College. Now it's Mount Tamateas College. So I was still doing that. I was running a GED program at San Quentin, and we were doing the introductory to college math classes, doing tutoring for guys after they complete their high school diploma to prepare them to go to PUP. And then right around 2000, I think it was 2014, I started hearing about this youth offender law. And if you had committed your commitment offense before the age of 24, they deemed that, all right, you did not have the mental capacity to understand the full repercussions of your actions or what have you. I was like, all right, I get it, but I still got these 4 life sentences, so it is what it is. I appreciate it, and it's going to help a lot of people. I didn't think it would help me. What it did do was it allowed the parole board to consider me for parole early. And they signed me a parole date, a parole hearing date. All right, I was like, okay, parole hearing. How many times have everybody been to the parole and been denied? A whole bunch of times. So I was like, all right, I went there with the best of intentions. I mean, I know myself very well. So I prepared a little packet of the stuff that I had done while in prison. And all of this classes that I've taken, self-help groups I've taken, none of that was with the intent of getting out of prison. It was just the intent of bettering myself. And I sat there in front of the parole board. They asked the questions. I had an answer for every question. The victims of the offense, they were at the parole hearing via telephone system or wherever. They was like, this is definitely not the same guy that we saw when he was 19 years old. And the parole board, they looked at my record, they looked at the good and bad, and they asked me questions about the bad. And I was straight honest. The same things I told you why I did all them bad things, I told them because I thought that's what was expected of me at 19, 20, 21, coming into the prison system.
And how old were you at the time, Tim?
When I went to the parole board, I was 44.
So you were there. So you were there from the age of 19 to the age of 45 before you had a hearing.
Yes, I was. And surprisingly, they was like, you are suitable for parole. And shocked me because, for one, nobody ever gets found suitable really on their first time going to the parole board. But they said that I had enough insight upon myself and my actions why I committed those crimes and why I wouldn't commit further crimes. It was like, you're no longer a threat to society. I cried like a baby.
And what was that transition like for you when you got out? What was that like for you? Did you know what you wanted to do? And was it scary? Was it scary to come out?
Um, Actually, for me, it was not scary. They took me from San Quentin and they dropped me off at the bus station over there in Tiburon somewhere. Uh, Gave me a bus ticket, told me to go to San Francisco, and gave me the address of where I was supposed to go to. It wasn't scary for me because being at San Quentin, it prepares you to be sociable, for one. You don't give off this mentality of the individual that's been locked up for decades or what have you. Um, so, I mean, and I did have a girlfriend at the time who later became my second wife. I still had the support of my mother. She was out there and all my brothers and sisters. So the transition for me, it wasn't terrible. I mean, I still ran into some stumbling blocks because it was just a lot of stuff I didn't know that had occurred over that 25 years of incarceration.
Yeah,
uh,
I think what you hear most often is, and I think people don't. There's a some people don't understand that, you know, when you went in, they had payphones. You come out,
right.
there's no payphones.
That is absolutely
They had no texting. They had, not everybody had a cell phone, or people really didn't have cell phones probably when you went in. They were
right.
probably using pagers and other stuff. So, most of the time when you apply for a job, it's all done online. How are you supposed to start that, right? So,
Right.
what were those some of the things that you had to learn, and what was that process like for you? Did you ever get to a point where, oh my God, I don't know where do I start with this?
Well, my mother is very tech savvy, so she helped me out a lot. um, my ex-wife, she sent me a phone as soon as I got out of prison. Sent it to the halfway house that I was staying at um, downtown San Francisco. Um, she helped me understand that process of just using the phone, um, applying for jobs. My very first job that I got a check from, that was from UPS. And the only reason I was able to really secure that job without having to go through an online situation was because the facility that I was at, 111 Taylor, um, they used to run like job interviews for people there. And someone from UPS had came just to do like a basic interview for everybody who was there to see who wanted a job there and who would qualify to do it. And that's how I ended up getting that job at UPS. And that was it was an odd job. I mean, it's a job for sure, and you better be in shape to do it. But I had to get up at like 3 in the morning. I had to be there in South San Francisco like 4 in the morning just to work this 4 hour shift from 4 to 8 in the morning. So I'm working that 4 hour shift that early in the morning left a lot of open time. And I was doing the volunteering at Five Keys at Glide Memorial. So I would do that from like to um, 9 to 3 in the afternoon, just volunteering, doing some tutoring. Then I had a second job working for a restaurant that was also in San Francisco, waiting tables. And I would do that in the evening. So initially, when I first got out, my days was really full, like 18 hours a day. I was working. Only reason it took me to the halfway house was because I needed a shower and a bed to lay in. Other than that, I was working 18 hours a day.
Really, and it's more of a halfway back, like to help transition for a lot of people. So, and then did you start getting more confidence? You had been down for so long. Did you find yourself a different person when you came out than when you went in?
I was definitely a different person than when I went in because I now had respect for myself and respect for other people. Um, Instead of taking from people, I gave to people. Um, I always put my best foot forward in anything I did. If there was an effort that needed to be given for a task, I gave 100% of that effort. I didn't just half step it or whatever. That's why I did good. Even waiting tables, I was people was like, dang, this is a nice guy. Even working at UPS, strenuous job. It was a workout every day, but I enjoyed it every day. But what I really enjoyed was really just helping the people that stayed in the Tenderloin in San Francisco um, to really improve their situation. That's why I really enjoyed volunteering while I was at Five Keys initially. I would help guys get housing at whatever shelters was available, make sure they had food, because if you came to class, then you went on a certain list for to be placed in shelters or on a food line or whatever. I enjoyed that.
And now you're working at a nonprofit now that actually provides services to juveniles and adults, and to help them get their high school diplomas and their GEDs, and really to go on to college as well. And you worked in this organization for a while now, and what kind of stuff, what have you learned since being there, and is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Because you seem like you're like a natural teacher.
I do really enjoy my job there. Currently, I'm an education coordinator for the organization, and I've been in that position now for a few years. I'm also on the DEI committee for the company. I'm the chairperson of the Abide, which is DEI for teachers of the company. Um, how did I get that position? I don't know. I didn't even vote for myself. I didn't nominate myself. They nominated me, and I won. They saw my ability to put the best needs of those that we serve first, and not my own needs or the company's needs or whatever. I'm really about, because it's DEI and we're dealing with diversity, inclusion. Um, it's really needed within the community, because I personally work down in East Palo Alto right now, and East Palo Alto, it's a great community, but it's still some need there. Ever since when you look back at the history of East Palo Alto and how it used to be like a red line community, and people couldn't live there unless you worked at Apple or what have you in that area. I mean, it's still some impoverished people there that still need assistance. So I enjoy working there. The facility where I work at, we also do training for construction programs. We do training for medical assistant programs to get your certification. And if you don't have your high school diploma or GED, everyone is referred to me. So that's what I prepare people to get careers. And if you want to go to college, we do all the preparation that you need to do to go to college or to find that career that you want.
So if you had to go back in time, and what would the older self tell the younger self in terms of advice? And what kind of advice would you give to teenagers and adults and people in prison on kind of like how to turn your life around and how to move in a direction that's more positive?
If I were to go back and see my, say, 13-year-old self, I would tell myself that education is important. But what's even more important is always doing the right thing. And doing the right thing isn't hard. It's an effort to do the wrong thing, for sure. To do the right thing is instinctual for most people. Um, that probably would be the most important thing, because that would have prevented me from going down that road where harming other people became easy. Uh, and what I do tell young people now, because I get a lot of students who are credit deficient from their traditional high schools, whatever. They be 16, 17 year olds. Some of them be on juvenile probation or what have you. Um, I tell them the truth of what it really is, and that going down the path that you're going, it won't be fun. It won't be easy. Your homeboys ain't gonna look out for you. You become maybe a burden to your family. Um, and it's easier to get a job. You'll make more money with an actual job, going to school and get an actual job, than you'll probably make out there hustling for real. And if you really think about it, this is what I tell them: you don't see very many rich hustlers out there. You see a bunch of dead hustlers, or hustlers that are doing life without prison, without parole in prison. You don't go see many out there. And I let them make the choice, because now they see it. They be like, You're right. And a lot of them really will choose to do the right thing. I mean, they may have made some mistakes, and that's why they're on probation or whatever. But it gives them an opportunity to see a bigger picture than just what their homeboys telling them, or what the guys while they were locked up in Wyatt Youth Authority or whatever was telling.
And then how do you motivate people if they say to you, you know what, school's not for me. I just never been good at it. I don't know. I want to finish it, but I don't know how to start. And I'm afraid. What kind of supportive services or what can people do to just, start moving in that direction? It could be, like you said, going to university or just going back for education, like personal growth wise. What kind of advice do you give people to go for it?
Um, Really just to be the model of the person that I was and the person I came, and they know who I was and the person I came, and they can see that path that I went through, and generally that's enough. Um, and it never hurts to just try to do more to better yourself. I mean, and they know this. Um, I go to now. I lately they've been having me go to the county jails down in San Mateo County, and it's primarily to do outreach for guys once they completing their sentence in the county jail portion, to if they want to go back to school, to come to Five Keys, and we'll help you finish getting your high school diploma, get you in a trade or what have you. Um, so I use my past as an example for them, because they can easily walk the same path that I walked. Um, Especially being that hyper aggressive male that I was at their age, 18, 19 years old. Um, we're all almost the same person. I'm just an older version of them I'll just walk the whole path until figured out the right way to go. And if I can do anything to prevent them from doing that same walk, I will. I mean, I'm brutally honest. Um, Beginning of next year, I'm going to start a mentorship program. Me and a bunch of guys that I know who all are former life prisoners who are all out doing great jobs now, still helping the community. A lot of guys that you also know, Fig. We're going to get approved to go into all these San Francisco County, Alameda County, Santa Clara County jails, just to sit down and really have honest conversations with guys.
And you know
That's
what? One thing, Tim, I really like about you talked about having victim insight. I think we talked about this prior to you being on the program, was that you have a lot of empathy for your victims too. And when you talk to folks, one of the things you do is you say to somebody, "Hey, you need to also think about your victim and the impact that has on them." And how did you get to that place?
that is definitely true. And I got to that place for myself is by really when I became accountable for my own actions, my own life, the actions that put me in prison for them 25 years. It allowed me to see my actions from my victim's perspective. I was this guy who had a gun up to their head, who was telling them to empty their pockets out, who went into their home to tell them, give me all your valuables in your home. And nobody really wants that um, ever to happen to them. And because I had done that and now I was able to see it from their perspective, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want that guy out on the street either. I would want that guy sitting in prison for the rest of his life also. But like I said, when I went to the parole board and they were there and they just listened to me talk, they was like, you're not the same person.
I have some nice rapid fire questions I give people at the end. I'm going to give you the same. Um, if you could meet one person in history, who would it be and what would you say?
If I can meet one person in history, one person, that's a hard one.
And it could be someone now too. It could be someone alive, or it could be either in history or someone now.
I would definitely like to meet Obama. I don't that's a good brother. He's a great speaker, a great orator, gives great energy. He's done a lot, and I if I could possibly model the way I just speak, and no one can speak as eloquently as him, in my opinion. Just, but it would be him just to sit down and just have a conversation about life, and I mean the path that we both grew up in. I mean, we're both black men, grew up in the United States, so it's very similar. He grew up in Chicago a lot, and I'm from Detroit. So there will be some similarities, but there was also the point where there was a divergence between our paths.
And what is your guilty pleasure food wise?
When I initially got out, everything was my guilty pleasure. I ate so much of everything; it was ridiculous. It didn't matter what it cost. I was like, "Yeah, give me that, give me that, give me that." Right now, I try to eat healthy. So oddly enough, I really enjoy the chicken salads at Chick-fil-A for some reason. They're
That,
very good.
that's your guilty pleasure. And then what is your favorite music?
I still listen to oldies for sure. The music that I grew up with is like the soundtrack to my life. Them soundtracks from like Shaft and Superfly, and that's the '70s R&B. Growing up in Detroit, if you didn't know Motown music, you can't call yourself being a Detroiter.
Yeah, and one of the podcasts we had, a couple of podcasts back, we had a good throwback on the Temptations. So
Right.
yeah, you should listen to that for sure. And what's on your bucket list? What's left for your bucket list?
Um, well, I'll have my bachelor's in science this coming school year, and I'm looking at a master's program, so that's definitely on my bucket list. And I would like to start really. I want to take another hard path. I want to go into some of these red states that still see guys who are coming out of incarceration as these really unreformed people who deserve nothing in life, and that's really just making it harder for them to succeed, and which really perpetuates the cycle of recidivism. I want to go into them states and be like, that's not what coming out of prison has to be. It can be easier. Um, there are laws that are like on the books that really prevent guys from really succeeding after they get out of prison. I want to change a lot of that. Um, there are already groups out there doing it. Like in California, there's a great group called Time Done who's helping get a lot of those really defunct laws pushed out the books. They help guys really just get into trades and schools or whatever they need to survive. I want to do that in like Kentucky or one of them states where they have no love for somebody who's gotten out of prison before because they think you deserve nothing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you and I spoke with, and I'm going to ask you one last question after this is, always my final question, but one of the things that you and I had a conversation about um, is it's not saying that you don't want people to be accountable for the things they did wrong. And like you said earlier, I wouldn't want some of these people on the street as well if they did bad things to people.
Right.
Um, it doesn't mean that they don't get a second chance, and it also doesn't mean that they can't that you don't make them accountable. And I think that's one of the things you and I were talking about before is you want to give people a second chance, but at the same time, those people that do the wrong things need to be held accountable as well. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, "Hey, they shouldn't be accountable at all." So you know what? Let's make their life difficult for them when they get out. You know?
That is absolutely true. And I'll give you a great example. My younger brother, he's locked up right now. He committed a murder, and he's been locked up now for like 11 years. I talk to him maybe every other week or so, and I still listen to how he communicates with me. Um, you know how some guys, while they're in prison, they still have this attitude where, oh, the white man did it, or if this wouldn't have happened, then I wouldn't have did this or whatever. Even after 11 years in prison, he still has that attitude. And I try to tell him you have to have some accountability for your action. The white man didn't make you pull the trigger and kill that dude. You did it, regardless of what the situation was, and you have to own up to that. And until you own up to that, there's a lot of stuff in you that just ain't gonna change. And that's my own brother I be talking to.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people they don't. I think sometimes people think that when you're providing assistance to people that in some ways that's synonymous with saying that you don't want somebody accountable for something. So I know you and I have had this conversation before, so I'm glad that you spoke about that. And then when I always ask this last question because I think it's important. What do you want to be remembered for, Tim? When you're no longer on this earth, what do you want when people say Timothy Long? What do you want to be remembered for?
I think I like to be remembered for giving more than I took from society, and I have taken a lot. Um, but every day I try to give back more, um, to do the right thing when even though the right thing is hard to do, um, to say the hard things that needs to be said, um, wherever I'm at. Um, Even in the face of discrimination, some things need to be said and not just ignored or whatever. It's easy to ignore the wrong things that people do, and just say you didn't see it or you just didn't want to be part of it. But I don't want to do the easy things anymore. That's why I want to go to these harder states and do the hard job.
Well, let me tell you, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for all you're doing in the community. Thank you for, walking the walk. You're out there doing the hard work that a lot of people don't want to do. And yeah, just thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for turning your life around and just having the insight to figure it out before it was too late. And yeah, thank you very much for being here, Tim. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me here.
Have a happy new year, everybody. And join us next time for the next podcast. Keep learning. Take care.